some product which is there and you're interacting with in terms of technology. You get inspired by that and you just want to build it. It is good to keep looking at that. It is good to get inspired, because that is what will help you in choosing your college or the streams in your college. And by college, I mean development, right? So where do we begin development? In between, let me take a step aside from this journey. You've learned programming. You might get into an internship during this period. And then also, parallelly, you will be learning development during that internship, because it would be very rare, unless it's a data structures and algorithms internship, that you won't be doing development. So that would be a very rare case. But in most of the cases, you will be building stuff. And to build stuff is super duper exciting. Okay, so where to begin? Well, just look around you. When you're using internet, what all devices do you have? You have a laptop, you have a mobile, you have a tablet probably, or any other device that connects to internet and runs, right? So the core of this is internet, interacting with internet. So where to begin? Find out a solution or a problem around you, which you need to solve. And it could be something as simple as making an application, a website or a mobile application to manage your own timetable. Or something more exciting could be manage the laundry of your hostel, or even more exciting, the mess, rating the food in the mess, so that the person who's cooking that food gets a true feedback. So let's move on. The first thing is to understand how the web works. And I'll just give you a very brief insight into it. Brief means very brief. Otherwise, I can go on it for around a half an hour or maybe 1.5 hours explaining how the internet works. So you need to know very basic terms in terms of IP, Internet Protocol, DNS, domain name servers. What is this? ISPs are there, Internet Service Providers. How do these three things combine together and provide you internet? IP is just like your house address. So if you are receiving a courier or a post by mail, what happens if someone is sending it from another state, city, or overseas? It reaches a particular pin code, then it gets further distributed. But before that, it reaches a particular city. Before that, it reaches a particular state. And whenever it reaches your house, before that, it reaches a society gate. So that's why if IP address is v4, that is x.y.z.a or a.b.c.d, whatever it is, then it is divided into multiple address hierarchies. Go back, try to Google about it, because learning development is a lot about Googling. And the second part is DNS. Now, DNS, if you've ever used proxy, you will understand what DNS is. DNS, for now, for basic understanding, is a list of all the websites, that is, for example, google.com, and where their data servers are located, I should say. And server is something I'll come back to. But wherever, when you hit google.com, whatever is visible on your browser, wherever that comes from, that is the address of that. So let's say if someone blocks a particular website, for example, facebook.com in your college for a time period, they just block that address. But there are people even in workplaces who are accessing it via proxy. So how does proxy work? You set up another machine which has the name abc.com, and it gets you data from where facebook.com was getting it, right? So in basic terms, that is what how it works. That is how probably if there is a country level lock, probably across different countries, different websites are prohibited in terms of, say, some Google products are prohibited somewhere. So that is how the lock is implemented. Okay, not lockdown, but lock. All right, so moving on further, client side and server side. Well, whatever you're looking on your screen is called as client side, and wherever that is coming from is called as the server side. In other terms, it is back end and front end. So back end is basically something which is not visible to you in terms of it is data or logic placed somewhere else, and front end is what is visible on your screen. Then there are more complicated terms, frameworks, easy terms like web apps and mobile apps. Yes, I'm not calling websites, I'm calling as web applications, web apps. Because these days, it is called as web apps. I'll give you the analogy behind this. Website is a legacy term, according to me. Why? Earlier, there was a folder in which there were multiple HTML files, later on CSS files also, or JavaScript files also, which had static data. So you used to copy that folder, put it up somewhere, and that folder, whenever you hit xyz.com, one file from that folder was fetched and displayed on your browser. Yes, your browser is displaying HTML even as we are speaking right now. So that is an HTML playing some media content inside it. Okay. So that is how it used to work. Right now, it is dynamic, completely dynamic. Data is constantly refreshing. You like or someone else likes your post, it is continuously visible on your screen. So that is why we call it as a web app. Applications have logic. Okay. Similarly, mobile apps. So now, okay, coming back to the main point, after programming, you've entered college and you have multiple streams to learn. One would be web application development. The other would be mobile application development. Another thing could be you just dive into something like machine learning. Another thing could be data science, which has a lot of machine learning involved in it these days, right? So you could get into any one of these. But remember, you had that idea that you want to build and you want to work upon. So think about it and go for it. Now, what is my personal choice and the way I see things into learning web application development or learning mobile application development? Let's take a look. Okay, I'll come back to that slide again. So whenever you want to start building something, you need to understand how the web works. For that, you need to learn how to write a server. Server. Now, what is a server? As I said, coming back to that term, when you are viewing facebook.com on your mobile, can you notice one thing? Everyone would, I'm sure. The design on the mobile app for everyone remains the same. Say all the Android users and all the iPhone users, it remains the same. Only the data inside it gets replaced, right? So there is a function running somewhere, some piece of logical code that tells that, okay, whenever Arpan has opened mobile Facebook app, then bring him and show certain data. Maybe if Arpan has liked a certain tech post, then more tech relevant data will be displayed in the feed, right? Whereas if some person XYZ had liked a lot of Bollywood posts, they would get a lot more relevant content according to that. Similarly, how Instagram or any other web application which gives you customized content works. So this piece of code is running in the backend, is running on the server on a machine. So when you open a mobile app or you have opened facebook.com, they get the design first, then they get the data, and that data is something that is displayed on your screen. So once the design is loaded, that is stored in your mobile app, no further design, that is that layout of the post, that is the square post or the rectangular post, space for an image, but maybe the image comes back from the server side, list of comments. Well, the data in the comments that this person says this, or maybe like or an emoji, that comes which like or how many likes is delivered from the server side. But what does an emoji look like is stored on a device, so that you don't have to get that heavy piece of design again and again. This makes your app super fast when you're just communicating in bare bones. This is also called as REST, R-E-S-T. Again, go back and Google, you can. But yes, you communicate using REST framework in application programming interfaces. Now, I'm not going to dive into all of that, but because this is more about the basics, this is how it works, right? Front end and back end. So there are combined frameworks also, which we'll be looking at right now. Okay. Now, when you want to begin, you need to learn how to do servers, and writing web applications. You can write mobile applications easily after that. You can learn it on your own. So there's not going to be much of a learning curve, a high learning curve or anything. So my personal preference is learn how the internet works, learn how to write a server, because even if in the future you're making a mobile app, then also you'll need to fetch data from somewhere. And when you want to write a scalable or huge database, then you need to know those skills, unless you have a co-founder or a partner who's writing that, right? Moving on. Yes, as everyone says, as Amitabh Bachchan once said, when you are making, you're learning something, there are three pillars. of education, Parampara, Pratishtha, and Prashasan. Okay. If you've watched Mohabbatein, you'll get the joke, otherwise not. So there are three basic core concepts when you want to begin the journey of a developer, a web developer, to be specific here, because I have chosen to learn web development first: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. These are the three things that your browser runs. So browser, the things which are displayed, the text is HTML. The boxes, if you can divide all the page, like even this slide, can I divide it into boxes? Like this is a box, this is a box, or this image is a box. All the logos are a box. If you are able to see my mouse, if not, that's fine. Then you are able to understand that all of this structure was given by HTML. HTML is not something of a for loop, if else, or anything in terms of logic. It's a markup language. It gives the structure to the page. Then CSS is something that fills in design, colors, making some square into circles, or making a straight line, all those things, borders, or maybe distance between two boxes, which is called as margin, all those things. And JavaScript puts in the life into the component. For example, when you hover over that emoji on Facebook in terms of liking, and you are able to see 5 animations. So whenever you hover and those 5 things are visible, that can be done in a basic manner using CSS. And if you want to complicate that animation, for example, when you click on it, it jumps and it becomes a like or a smiley or a wow something, then that is done using JavaScript. Okay, so JavaScript is very important for a developer these days. No matter what, JavaScript is super duper important, right? Okay, moving on. Now, what can you make with just these 3 basic skills, and how much time does it take? You can complete all of this and build your own resume in, I would say, less than a week, if you are giving at least 4 hours every day, maybe 5 days. And yes, resume is very important. So if you build a very decent resume using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you can host it for free on a website like github.com. You'll get something like arpan.github.io. You can just host it for free. You can use Firebase for hosting. Firebase is a Google product. You can look at that. And there are a ton of free hosting services available, right? So make a resume, go back and try to build something that is useful. Okay, what next? I've built a static website, a resume. What happens after that? Well, this is a speed breaker. Now, okay, should I learn Node.js? Should I learn Django? Because suddenly we are going on asking, I've learned HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We know there is a term called as backend or server side or framework. We now want to know, what do we learn? Should it be Django? Should it be Golang? Should it be Node.js? Should it be Ruby on Rails? Honestly, doesn't matter. Choose any of these 4. My personal preference, either go with Django, Rails, or Node.js. Django was my first framework. Rails is something I'm still working on. Commutal, the server side of it, is developed on Rails. And Node.js is something I created a course on, right? So I explored all 3 of these in depth. Personal preference goes with Rails, but Rails has less number of jobs right now in the Indian market. In Europe, it has a ton of jobs. But irrespective of that, and Go is a very amazing language for server side, which is coming up. It's being developed by Google, so quite amazing for the capabilities and for the speed it provides, right? How does it matter what framework you choose? Django is based on Python. Rails is based on Ruby. Node.js is based on JavaScript. Now, Node.js, according to Stack Overflow's survey, has been one of the most loved or one of the most favorable frameworks, not frameworks, I would say, runtime environment or the backend technology favored by developers. Why? You see the JS in Node.js, that is JavaScript. So as a developer, if you've already learned JavaScript, Node.js uses JavaScript plus some additional concepts. Why not go with Node.js? You can go with Node.js, and you'll be beginning with the first framework, which is called as Express.js. Okay, so Express.js is basically something that gets installed onto Node.js, and you can use it. So choose any one of the frameworks and write. So initially, when you begin development, say you choose to build a social media website or any e-commerce website or a project, that laundry management system, that hospital management system, or that college mess management system, always look out for something that people will use. because you are in college right now. And this is very important. You have whatever 1, 2, 3, 4 years left in front of you. And once you make something, you can just go on and knock, not in the lockdown, but okay, so let's hypothetically assume that you're in the hostel or in the college. You can just knock in on the door of your hostel mate, or maybe stand up in front of the college and yell at your friends and tell them to install your app and use it. And you can literally, be rude to them. Okay, use my app or I ain't talking to you, because this will be your initial audience. They will use it and they'll tell you an honest feedback, and this is how you improve. So this is how it works. Now, once you've done, the next speed breaker that comes in is, I've learned how to write server. I've done HTML, CSS, JavaScript. I've created a couple of apps which are good solutions. I know everything. Now, today, the world is about front-end frameworks. And what do I learn? So there are 3 front-end frameworks which are the most popular right now. Angular, on which Communal is made. I'll tell you why the choice. Then there is React, and then there is Vue. So Vue and React work quite similar. They work in a quite similar way. React being the most popular one, most favored again by the developers. These 3 are JavaScript frameworks, right? In fact, officially React is a library, Angular is a framework. Okay, so what is the difference between library and a framework? Framework gives you a certain set of folders and files to write inside to. It is opinionated in terms of structure. So there is a folder where you put HTML files. There is a folder where you put JavaScript and CSS files. That is the way you write code. And this helps you write more organized code if you're beginning with things. Whereas in terms of library, you don't have any particular structure or anything. You are independent. So people like React a lot because of the independence. I like Angular a lot because of the structure it is giving to me when I'm beginning with a new project. And having worked on Ruby on Rails, which is again a structured or an opinionated framework, that appealed to me, right? So let me just do a small or a quick recap. First, school of development, which is called as programming. You've learned how to build the logic and everything. You've done an internship where you started going for development. You chose that out of mobile and web, I will learn first how to write a server. I've done some sort of server development in terms of now Django, Ruby on Rails, Node.js, or Golang. And I've also explored HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, built a couple of projects. Here is where you can choose between mobile development or a front-end framework development. If you think you want to do Android or an iOS app, go for it. Or Flutter, go for it. Flutter is a framework which is capable of writing all the 3 apps in terms of JavaScript, a mobile or web, mobile in terms of iOS and Android. Okay. If you want to specifically learn Android, go for it. You can choose anything, or a front-end framework. You can do that super easily. Right now is the moment where you make a choice. I made a choice, and how did I make a choice? To the product which I'm making or the application which I'm making. Now, this learning at this point of time is not based on me just wanting to explore. I have an application, I have a project which I'll be coding, right? You won't be just learning Android to explore libraries which are written in Kotlin. You won't be. Or maybe how does iOS work? You won't be. You will be building something. So is the requirement to build a mobile app, or is it not? If your application always requires internet to run, it cannot run without internet, go for web. If it requires, if it can be stored and it can store some data, then go for an application. Why? Because why would you want your user to download an application for something which always requires internet? For example, if you want to pay phone bills and you want to make an app for it, you'll always require internet to pay those bills. And how often will you be anyways accessing your old phone bills? You won't be, right? So go for an application which is web-based. And these days, there's a term called PWA, Progressive Web Apps, which look just like mobile apps, have a very good amount of smoothness, and can get just stored on your mobile, and it occupies just kilobytes or maybe 1 or 2 MBs. If you look at the option add to home screen, which pops up, that is Progressive Web App, right? Just explore. I'm just throwing in a lot of terms for you so that you go back and explore, and I'll be available always to answer things. Okay, moving on. We've now become a developer. What happens after that? Well, you are making real world projects alongside. So why to do or not to do? First application that you will be making most presumably is going to be a to-do app. It's very simple, but it gives you a lot of clarity and thought. Or you could make a contact list, adding some contacts, removing from it. You could make something of a B2, a ledger as in your expense manager. I spent money on this, I spent money on this, I got my salary or my pocket money plus, then I spent money on this and this, and you get to understand how these real world applications work. This is a point wherein as a developer, you are not just understanding the depth of code and becoming a more sound and tuned techie or a coder or a developer. You're also understanding the product, the way people would be using what you're building, which is, I would say, more important than you just understanding tech, because it's if it was on a balanced scale, then I would say understanding the product would weigh a little heavier than understanding just tech, because you, although it is difficult to understand tech and be a developer, you have learned across a lot of journey, but what you will be building, if you don't understand it, then there's no point building it, right? So understanding your product is a part of being a developer. A developer is not just a coder who's given, okay, code an addition program and done. Why should I code an addition program? Why should I make a calculator? What is my calculator doing different than other calculators? All of those things. But don't let me discourage you in from making calculator, because that does give you a lot of understanding in tech. Okay, some things you do for learning, some things you don't do for learning. You do it for building. Okay, all right. Okay, so what happens next after that? Well, post that, you will be making larger applications. You'll be understanding how applications at larger scale works, understanding of something which a technical term is called as DevOps. Although DevOps is a very specialized thing, but to have an understanding of how servers, how cloud works, the place where your website is hosted, web application is hosted, the place from where data is coming in, that is needed, a very basic understanding. Now, I'm sure this all is building up. Okay, मुझे कुछ भी नहीं आता, या फिर I've done some part. There's a lot to be learned. Take it step by step. It's pretty easy. I started development officially 1.5 years past my actual graduation time. Now, what happened? I did it within 6 months. I was working on a real life project, Kalpavriksha Healthcare, which recently was mentioned. I was building an electronic health record, which is a clinic management system wherein the doctors still write their prescriptions online. Lab reports are printed out of it, and machines are linked to it. So all that interfacing is done. And that was my first actual real life project, which I made out of coding, right? So when people are using it, that is a different kind of adrenaline rush. Moving on. Now, again, nothing changed on the milestone part. I'll give you some examples of these summer projects, and you would have learned and heard about a lot of stories. One is GitHub. Now, github.com is something that was a summer project, right? And Microsoft bought it this time. But for all these years, it was hosting the world's largest open source projects, and it was giving access to you for free. Android's code is available. Commutal's front-end code is available. Commutal was also born out of this need to solve something for ourselves as a team of organizers. So these are two examples. Why should you be making something which is used by others? I've spoken about that a lot. But now, one important aspect of being a developer is contributing to open source. And I'm trying to push you towards contributing to Commutal also. But I'll tell you, if you've heard about GSOC, Google Summer of Code, Google actually builds communities, supports communities, Google Developer Group being one of them. So over there, Google runs a program wherein if an organization has all their code open sourced and a lot of people are contributing it and using the product, Google pays the people who are contributing to it from the people these organizations select. So it's not an internship, but it's a program wherein you learn and you contribute to someone else's project. Why to do that? Why do I contribute to someone else's project? Why don't I make my own? Well, you can and you should, but contributing to someone else's project gives you access to things they have learned over a period of time, the way they have structured their code, the way they have used libraries or some libraries that they have created, for you to understand how to write code in a more organized and a structured manner. So that is why it is super duper necessary to be understanding someone else's code or to contribute to a larger scale project. And that larger scale could be your own project also. If you have a college society running, which is building a solution, just ping them just after this talk that I want to get enrolled in your project and start going about it. And if you want to do open source contributions, and if you want to do open source contributions into GSOC or any other open source programs, just Google it. A huge part of development is Googling stuff, finding things online. If you don't find a solution once, Google it the second time, the third time, ask for help from the community. Put that comment on Stack Overflow, ask that question, put that comment on github.com, your library isn't working, help me out. People might be rude, but it doesn't matter as long as it solves your purpose. If you ask a stupid question, doesn't matter. There would be people telling you that you've asked a stupid question and you'll understand you've asked a stupid question. So don't worry about it. You'll get to know about how smart or less smart you are. But ask those questions and make those applications. This is how a great product is born, and you should be working on something. Developing things is really, really something that is important these days. Even for professional careers, what all things do you work on? Well, you become a software development engineer. Let me just get to that slide. Software development engineer could be divided into front end. Front end is someone who just works on HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or maybe Angular, Vue, or React. There is a backend engineer. Backend engineer is someone who just writes the server code, creates logic of what data to be developed, displayed on the front end. So all these things are running together. Mobile app developer, Android, which uses your app. That app will be developed by you, but someone would be writing the server for it if that requires a server. Mostly apps do. Then there is a full stack developer. Full stack means you know both backend and front end to be developed, so you know both server side and client side. If you know both those things, then you become a full stack developer. Okay, so all these fall into the category of software development engineer. Amazon uses Spring a lot. Amazon uses React a lot. Facebook developed React. Facebook open sourced it. It has the largest community. That is why it is having the most loved framework or library tag to it. Then JavaScript was developed in about 10 days. So officially in JavaScript, you can do 1 + 1 = 11 if one is in string and one is a number. Yeah, that is one of the early things that was there. Now, if they change it, all the websites across all the browsers could crash. So they've written wrappers around it. For example, TypeScript is a wrapper language written around JavaScript. So TypeScript is a lot like looking in syntax with respect to Java. But one important thing before I just conclude is JavaScript and Java are two very different languages. So if someone tells you Java seekhu ya JavaScript, should I learn Java or JavaScript? Well, there's no correlation. You can choose any language and learn JavaScript. The specific use is in web development, but a lot of companies are these days taking those data structures and algorithm interviews in JavaScript as well. So you can just pick up a language and learn things around it. Go for it. Just be that developer, make that project. If it runs, if it fails, if it becomes a super duper hit, very viral, do it. Development gives you an understanding of how products work and makes you more sound in terms of technologies that are going on around. And as a developer, you need to be updated with the latest of technology, whatever is going on. Okay. So with this, I would like to conclude. I hope all these things have been useful to you. More so, moving on, let's take some questions that people want to ask, and anything and everything, just feel free to ask, and I'm super duper happy to answer. Okay, so I'll pass on to the moderator. Any questions that everyone has? Thank you.
So, sir, beginning with the few of the questions that people have asked, the first question is, How and why is Python such a versatile language? Like basically how it is so well integrated in every domain, for example,
Mhm.
stock market, data
Mhm.
analysis, web development, and all of that. Like,
Okay.
but other languages like JavaScript are like limited to
Mhm.
websites and web development only.
Interesting. I guess this is the first time someone has asked me this question. Otherwise, people are mostly asking that I should take a Python because Python is integrated everywhere. So it's good that you're asking this question. One, a language is very much integrated into multiple parts because of its libraries. So if Python is integrated into web, it is because it has a framework Django, which has been developed quite some time ago, and it got very much adopted by developers. Why did it get adopted? Python is a language which has a syntax which looks very similar to English. So learning Python, Python is the easiest language officially in terms if you know English to learn. That is why learning web development Python probably was picked up by a lot of developers, and Django was the framework. Not many frameworks were available. There was PHP, there was Ruby, there was uh, uh, I guess these three were there: PHP, Ruby, and Python. So Ruby on Rails came just after that. Before that, Python was there. Coming to stock markets. Now, if I look at stock markets, let me just understand that there is a term, make you understand that there is a term called as WebSockets. WebSockets is something wherein you can communicate real time. Real time as in when you are doing a chat, you are typing something, pressing enter, and it immediately gets delivered to your friend. So this is achieved by WebSockets. Python Django framework has this technology inbuilt. Initially, it was just it could be implemented by something called as socket WebSockets in JavaScript. So this is one of the reasons. But more importantly, if you look at the other side of it, machine learning, which is why Python is the most being used, is because of a ton of libraries related to machine learning, which are there only for Python. So there is a library called scikit-learn. There is a library called NumPy or NumPy, as people call it, which analyzes, gives you an access to analyzing multiple, number-related operations super fast. So all these things are there. It's not that Python is the fastest language. If you build a website or a web application in C++, it is bound to run faster as compared to Python. But Python makes things easier for a developer. So the job of a developer is to make things instead of understanding and going into the depth of how that piece of hardware is working. If that does Python does for you, then that is why. But in short, the answer is Python has all those libraries which were written, a ton of libraries which were written over all these years, which are not written in any other language, due to which it gets integrated into all these domains. Right? I hope that answers your question.
So next question is, like if someone wants to become a DevOps, like how to get
Mhm.
into DevOps? Like does it require coding and how much it is related to web development?
Okay. So I have a friend, a couple of friends, in fact, who are not into development at all and are super experts at DevOps. They are consulting large companies and small startups for DevOps. So it does not require. One part is that. Second is it good to know development? If you are getting into DevOps, it's always good to know development to understand how that web application is working. And third part, how to get into DevOps. Well, there's a lot of courses available on the web around DevOps that give you a general understanding of how these large scale servers, machines, which we call as cloud, these run. So there are different terms like containers or maybe load balancers or machines. In Amazon, it is called as EC2. There is S3, which is data buckets online. You need to understand all those terms, do a certification online if you want to get into it, and you'll be an official certified DevOps engineer. And that's all it takes, I guess. And then you can keep on increasing and improving your skills as per the different use cases that arrive when you are handling different clients.
So next question is, do you think that languages like PHP are outdated and have no future?
I don't think PHP has no future or anything. There are there are a lot of websites or web applications which are running in PHP. Yes, PHP is quite an old technology, but PHP has certain amount of web frameworks which are coming up. Laravel has been there for quite some time. So PHP is definitely not something which is going to die anytime soon, or just run out of it. No one knows, they might come up with certain innovation and get back into the mainstream. But as of now, in terms of how famous it is, or if you as a beginner developer should take it up, I would suggest go with the current upcoming technologies. So there's one term that someone who with whom I learned web development said, let's not build for the past, let's build for the future. So everything you build it with the latest technology available, so that, because that latest is going to get old in the future. So why do you want to build for something which is already old, until and unless all your users are already on that older technology, right? So PHP is not dying out, but if you want to learn Node.js, Python, or anything.
Okay, so next question is, like, are all the software developer jobs slowly moving towards machine learning and artificial intelligence and leaving
Mhm.
development behind?
I don't think so. Even if you are learning machine learning, even if you are learning artificial intelligence, or say data science or anything, you'll need to represent what you're building somewhere, and that somewhere would be mostly on internet. And for representing that, if it is a project that you've made, either you can use someone else's web application, or you can create your own web application. So I think development is getting more and more integrated into things across different technologies. And development is actually, internet is something that is actually taking up. Why? Because a simple example is, if you've seen Google's Stadia, so that is bringing those high definition games into your browser directly. So I think it is the opposite.
Okay, sir. Sir, how can someone like get selected for GSOC? Like how he should start contributing to open source projects, and how to find them, and how to get started with like all the open source thing.
Hmm. Okay. So there's you need to make a strategy out of it. I've been with a number of GSOCers, luckily, during my work term at Ninjas. And one thing that they all started with was finding those easy issues online on GitHub to solve. And when you're beginning with open source, let me just lay down a basic strategy. First, learn a technology. Pick up a technology and learn it. It could be Python, it could be Django, as in Python Django, or Ruby on Rails, Node.js, or any other thing, if you're going for C++ or any calculative machine learning open source thing, right? Then, if you're looking specifically for GSOC, go to the GSOC website, find out certain organizations, maybe 2 or 3, which have been participating for the past years regularly and were approved by Google, will be on GSOC website. Start contributing to them. What will happen is that you will get to understand the project you are contributing to. You'll get in touch with the moderators, maintainers of that project, the owners of that project, and you'll interact further with them. You'll be a part of their community. And when time comes, when GSOC applications are getting rolled out, as in are open, post that, at that point of time, you would have made enough number of open source contributions to those organizations projects, right? And after that, you write a proposal. So what is GSOC about? You building a feature end to end for that particular organization. For example, there's an organization called as Public Lab. Public Labs has a portal for environment related portal, and I won't go into the details, but they do a very good job in terms of when they are having a very live community for GSOC. So last year they were there in GSOC, and people write in proposals for making certain sort of dashboards, representing data in a particular format, maybe writing graph libraries wherein you represent data in a graph form. So all of those things. That proposal gets reviewed. The Googler, not the Googlers, but the people at Public Lab review it. They have certain XYZ number of seats, as in 1, 2, or 3, or whatever number of seats. They select, shortlist those people who have the best proposal according to the features that they want the most. They send it over over to Google, and then you get shortlisted. So find a project on GSOC and just begin with it.
Okay, sir. Sir, next question is, uh, if someone wants to get into app development,
Mhm.
he should start with cross-platform languages like React Native, Flutter, or he should start with languages like Java or Kotlin.
Sorry, the first part got interrupted. Someone wants to get into.
If someone wants to get into app development,
Okay.
should he choose cross-platform languages like React Native, Flutter,
Mhm.
or should he go with languages like Java or Kotlin?
Well, depends. That's a personal choice. These days, the trend a lot is about React Native or Flutter, even people using other things like Ionic for desktop for other kind of apps. But and native apps, not React Native. Native apps means Android and iOS. It is a personal choice what you want to make. Even when you're doing React Native, you will need to understand a certain part of Android and a certain part of iOS when you are actually deploying or making those apps live on Play Store or App Store. So in terms of Java or Kotlin, basically Kotlin is something that is being used by Android worldwide now. So you should be going, if you're looking for Android, you should be going for it. Um, Personally, my personal suggestion would be pick up the native one, begin development on it, go to a certain extent where you understand all the technicalities of things. Then when you come back and develop in, say, Flutter, or maybe if you develop in any other React Native also, you will have an understanding of how that device actually works. So have understanding of at least one device, because after that you'll be able to just create an analogy of how it works on the other device.
Okay, sir. Sir, the next question is, what happens if someone builds a app or a website
Mhm.
or a game, but it doesn't grow or it doesn't gain doesn't really gain much approval, like how to stay motivated and all that.
Hmm.
Like you are developing, but it's not getting approval or it's not getting famous, it's not appreciated, then how to stay motivated?
So that is where the product aspect of your application comes in. First, a lot of times we start developing out of excitement that, okay, this is going to be, according to me, useful for a lot of people. Uh, would it be useful to you, or is it a problem that actually needs solution? Think about that. Then once after you've developed it and people are not using it, find those people whom you thought that they would be using it and ask them if they know about the app. If they don't, give it to them to use it. That is why I'm saying you're in college. Why not just find your friends, make them use it? And if they say that this is a problem, this is the problem, find it out, improve your application. And this is how everything works. It's not that Facebook just grew in one night. There were people using it, they keep on adding features to it, and then it keeps on growing. And there have been lull points wherein the usage would have dropped amongst all the apps. So you have to find out why people are not using it. uh, Instead, if you just launch an app and it does not start getting used on day one, it does not getting used on day one ever. It has to be something either people were already expecting it, right? So if not, then find out the reason why is it not working. And if you think that that reason is big enough that you should be killing that app, you can go ahead and remove that app, or maybe just leave it there. It will be there on your portfolio at least to show off on your resume. uh, Find out the next solution and go building for it. But don't lose motivation. There's nothing to be losing motivation. You have the skills to make that next app. Why not build it?
Okay. Sir, also, it's like some people think that only people with some particular major like computer science can get into development, or if someone like from commerce stream or arts stream wants to get into development, like
Mhm.
can everyone get into development, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was in electronics branch. The toughest programming question that would have been there in my college days was probably printing prime numbers from 0 to 100, and maybe something around those lines. There was nothing like recursion. There was nothing like dynamic programming or trees during my college time. And when I started learning programming, it was like just start learning from a clean slate. And it does not matter whatever stream you are in. Yes, a certain logical approach is needed in terms of mathematics. You do not actually utilize mathematics a lot unless you're doing machine learning mathematics. So But yes, anyone can take it up. I've seen a lot of students with me who were not from computer science background at all, had never ever done programming, but they are now experts. They're doing programming, software developer, engineer jobs.
Okay, sir. Also, sir, similar question to this, like, is a MS or PhD important for getting a machine learning job?
Um, Depends. I think getting a machine learning job today is not that difficult, provided you have enough research papers and projects to be done. Uh, Earlier, it was difficult probably to get into machine learning as a fresher, but today it is not that difficult. It is difficult still. So having an MS basically gives you an edge ahead of everyone applying for that job, because it shows that you've done some part of research in that particular domain. So doing an MS, if you're going into machine learning, would definitely be beneficial. But that does not mean that if you've done more projects and you've done more research papers than someone who's getting into MS, you will definitely have that weightage, because um, I mean, today you can just display your skills online a lot. There is a platform called Kaggle where you can just participate in different competitions and you can get a job also out of it and earn money by winning those competitions a lot.
Uh, Also, sir, when people get into development and they want a job, so everyone's dream company is like Google. So
Mhm.
how someone can get a job at Google, like,
How
and also
someone.
participating in like GSOC, CodeJam, Kickstart,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
helps in getting a job at Google,
So
like because
whenever you
everyone's
yeah, please continue. Sorry.
uh,
Hello.
hello because
Your
hello.
Yeah, it is there now.
Because everyone's dream company is Google. Like everyone wants to work
Mhm.
at Google headquarters and live
Mhm.
that Google fancy life.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, so I'll divide this into multiple parts. One is why do you just need a job at Google? Google is a super amazing place to work, but don't just limit yourself to working at one company in the world. There are a lot of good companies out there, and it is great that you're keeping your targets high and want to get into Google, but don't just restrict yourself. You never know, the project you are passionate about is somewhere outside of Google, somewhere at a different company, right? So it's great that you want to keep that, but don't limit yourself ever in life. Even if it is Facebook, even if it is any other company where you want to go, it is, and every place is an amazing place to work, but don't limit your options ever. Second is how to go for it. Well, uh, find out how does Google conduct interviews, as in what types of questions. So according to me, a lot of data structures and algorithm questions are asked, system design questions are asked at the beginner level when you are a fresher. So prepare for those interviews. Participating in GSOC or Codin or any other competition, APAC that Google does, uh, you need to participate in them because they help you get your first round of interview at Google. Instead of you applying with the thousands of people who apply, your resume will be at the top. You'll be having a referral to ask that. On the other side, in a parallel manner, when you apply, find out your seniors or people you are in touch with to get a referral at any other company or any company, including Google. And if you have a referral, that gives you an edge when you're applying. And this applies to every company that you're applying. Because even if I am hiring tomorrow, and if, say, someone from my company says that this is a good person to hire, I would be wanting to directly conduct their interview instead of going through the 500 resumes that I might receive. So you should be looking at uh, getting a referral. And all these competitions, they just get you at the end a referral or your first round at Google interview. Post that, your preparation is what takes you through that interview and gets you crack it. So gets you to crack it, right? So just go about the preparation, find the referral, apply for it, and sit down in that interview. And trust me, once you have a good referral and you've done enough amount of projects and coding, say you have some good rating at CodeChef and other online coding platforms, that will, everything will add on into your resume.
Okay, sir. One basic question people have that
Mhm.
what's the main difference between dynamic and static website, and what's like better option for initially building a portfolio?
Hmm. I would still say, even if you're building an initial portfolio, go with a dynamic website because you'll learn a lot. But coming to the basic difference, if you go back in time, or maybe if you encounter some websites wherein you submit a form, a contact us form, and it refreshes and takes you to another page, then that is a static website. That particular part of the website is at least static. Wherein everything in web is request and response. So once you submit the form, it collects the data and sends a request to the server that I want to store this data in from the contact form. And in response, the server says, okay, take the user to the thank you page. Whereas in a dynamic website, I'll give you a very simple example. Does it happen that when you click on a like button on Facebook, that it refreshes and takes you to the next page? Or maybe you cannot put or press another like button till the first like gets done. No, it doesn't, right? Does it happen that when you have posted something, when someone posts a comment onto it, it gets added automatically? It's not that when you come back later and you refresh and you see suddenly there are 300 comments. No, it gets added in real time. So all these parts make the website dynamic, wherein things are interacted with from the server, and you do not actually need to take the user for every response to a request that it receives to another page. An example is when you just submit a post, it just gets appended to that page, right? It does not refresh and shows you that post. So that is how dynamic websites work.
Okay, sir. Thank you. That's all with the questions. I think majority of the people have got their questions answered.
Great.
Uh,
Cool, people. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much for attending. I hope it's been something that will be useful to you. And I hope to see more and more people getting into development. And if you are looking to contribute to an open source project, I'm here with this small logo, which is here. You can go to github.com and search for Commoodle, and you'll find the link.